Welcome to part 3 of the resource allocation decision tool walkthrough for the first module where we've got an increase in budget. We've fast forwarded a bit since the end of the last part of this walkthrough video. We've entered in all the details for our second option, and we've now got to the point where the reader is now telling us we've completed the series of questions relevant to option 2. And it's now asking us to make a choice between the different options, that we commence the first option, the second option, or none of these options. However, we don't have to make that choice straight away. We do have the option to generate an interim report. The interim report will open in a new window, and this is a point where it's important to make sure that you're using a PC, because Mac will not we'll have difficulty with the interim report, particularly with trying to generate a Word version, a Microsoft Word version of the interim report. The Word version is very important because it allows you to go through and modify text within the interim report. There may be some sentences that are phrased in a way that you think, oh, I need to edit that, or there might be some additional punctuation that might have come up depending on how we've entered data into the ReAD-iT. As you can see here in this first sentence in the summary, we've got 2 full stops, and that's just because we have one auto-generated by the report and we entered in one during the entry of information to the ReAD-iT. So to give you some orientation to the interim report, it starts off with the summary that describes some of the background questions that were asked early on in the report. It describes the 2 options. As you can see here, there's a bit of inconsistency in how I've phrased the 2 options. In one, I've specified the time horizon, and the other, I've forgotten to do that, which was an important part of the MEOP format. And for consistency, it'd be good to do that. So you can either go back through the ReAD-iT itself and do those modifications in the ReAD-iT, or you can download the Word version of the interim report and do it there. After this, we have an appendix which demonstrates how each question was responded to when you're completing the ReAD-iT. For option 1, the hydrotherapy group exercise program for people with osteoarthritis to reduce pain, improve function and quality of life, the results are separated into 3 theme areas, one being appropriateness, one being impact, and the third being readiness. Now, each of those theme areas has separate domains that lie within it. So for appropriateness, there are internal considerations and external considerations. For impact, there is the extent of the problem, the effectiveness of the option, the cost effectiveness of the option, its impact on access, on reputation, on independent services, and on the workforce. For resourcing, for readiness, there are domain areas of resourcing and stakeholder support. Now, one of the important things, an important feature of the ReAD-iT is that the interim report generates for you a graphical representation of the results. This graph is set up to demonstrate whether each of the options, the way that they were responded to, has less support or greater support for being the option that you're wanting to select. So here we have some questions relating to the theme area of readiness and the domain areas of resourcing and stakeholder support. You'll see the resourcing, big long green bars. This indicates something that's very much in favour of this option. The more green, the longer the green bars, the more in favour the responses were for this particular option. You'll see that there is no response here for the stakeholder support. If you recall, there was only one stakeholder who answered this question, and they weren't a critical stakeholder for this particular question. So this only focuses on the percentage of critical stakeholders in support of an option or not support of an option. With the extent of the problem, we have some orange bars indicating that the problem, it's of some moderate consequence. It is somewhat severe, it is somewhat common, and it's probably pretty well addressed, potentially well addressed already in the community. So what you'll notice is that for some of these domain areas, how you respond to one question will affect how all of the other questions are represented. So if the problem was very common and very severe, then what you'd expect to see is 2 long green bars in favour of this option. However, if the problem is already very well addressed in the community, that there are already services out there addressing this problem, it would actually mean that you might get an orange or you might get a red, because even though the health condition or problem is a big problem where it's there, the community is already being well served by the services already in place, and there's no need for additional services. So the actual problem that you're faced with is not that great. So again, how you respond to one individual question will not be directly represented by the color of the bar that you see in this graph. Rather, it's how you respond to the set of questions within that domain. Similarly, if we look at effectiveness of this program when providing ideal circumstances, yes, we said it was somewhat effective, so we've got a bar going out part of the way out towards the full extent. Our certainty in this judgment was informed by a meta-analysis, so we were actually very certain. However, if we had said that we were very uncertain in that judgment, even though we said it was somewhat effective, that would all come back to being an orange bar, because the quality of evidence underpinning the judgment of effectiveness is just as important as those that indicate whether it's effective or not. So there's no point saying that something is very effective if you've got no evidence to support that statement. So that'll still lead to some orange bars coming up in this graph. The effectiveness, does it work in real life? Well, we don't know yet, because this is an option that is being used to commence that isn't already in place. So if it was already in place, we'd have some questions about how it's working in real life that we would have had to have answered. Questions on cost effectiveness, questions on access and equitable service delivery. Here we've seen access to other services. Now, when going through this graph, I look at that and go, oh, actually, I don't think it's that fabulous in terms of access to other services, because it was quite independent from other services. I didn't think it would improve access to other services. So I'll have to go back and modify how I responded to that question. So the way we do that is to go back in, close this down, go back into the ReAD-iT, go to the navigation, and go back to my option 1, question on access. Which was in the 40s. Impacts on the workforce, interdependent services. It was near the cost question. The important thing with using the mega menu in this way is that you can quickly go through and find the questions, hopefully, that you're wanting to revise. Impacts on the workforce, impacts on independent services. Here we go, access. So we click on the access question, come back here, improved access. Upon reading the question again, I think, no, actually, it's not going to affect other services. So no substantive change to other services. So save that, go back to the ReAD-iT navigation, and let's go all the way to the end of option 2. Click on the last question we answered in option 2, go to next, and we're back here at the interim report. So we can regenerate the interim report, scroll back down, and have a look. So because we've changed how we responded to the access question, it's actually changed the response to that whole area. They're now orange because there is no longer an outcome that is definitely in favour of the this option. So changing a response to one question can potentially, again, change response to all the questions in the access domain. Again, the colors for each of the domain areas are relevant to how all the questions were answered within that domain, not just individual questions. Okay, so when you're looking at the report, here we have a little bar color guide, bar length guide, and then we go into option 2, and we have all the same information for option 2. We have the graph indications for option 2. So what you'd be able to do is to compare the graphs, the output graphs for both option 1 and option 2 to help inform your decision. So if we go back to the ReAD-iT, what we'll say is, okay, let's do option 1. And what we'll say is, what are the key factors that influenced you in coming to this decision? So we talk about things such as the evidence that we might be much more certain. So greater certainty in the effectiveness and cost effectiveness of this option. What are the key assumptions that we've made? Key assumptions might be, well, certainly the evidence supporting cost effectiveness is now quite dated and was taken from the US context, which might not apply well in Australia. So a comment there regarding the evidence. There might also be a key assumption that staff who are qualified to provide hydrotherapy in our service will wish to do so. The next question, number 54. Now, once we've finished this question, you'll be generating a final report. Once we've done this, we can't edit the ReAD-iT any further. So we're going to make a recommendation. So we'll take this report, this final report, and take it to our executive to help influence their decision, which will be the final decision. Again, this question just influences some of the report generation terminology that's used. We've finished the report. Click here to view the final report. So we just click here. Again, we can download the final report in a Word format, so we can edit things. And in the final report, you'll see these blue sections, which are pretty much just recommended sections we ask you to fill out once you finish the ReAD-iT. So the names of the people involved, who the target audience is, and if there's an endorsement, someone who's reviewed and agrees with it. Some area for a background and to describe the option that you're recommending. We've got the decision graphs here for each option or for the option that was selected. And then we have the Word versions of the responses to each of the questions. And then we also have the appendix where we have all the responses to option 1 and also all the responses to option 2 that we were comparing it against. So there is a disclaimer at the end. Again, the decisions that are being made are your decisions. The ReAD-iT doesn't make the decision for you. All it does is help you to gather the information that's relevant to making a decision of this nature, synthesize it, and present it in a way to help you make the comparisons that are of relevance. I hope you found this walkthrough video helpful, and please feel free to look at other walkthrough videos on the ReAD-iT website for more information.